So I guess for our next question, and Geoff like kind of segued into it. For this one, we got to confront you, Jon. We gotta we gotta
do
come
it.
after you. We have to talk about the Knicks minute situation. The question is going to be: does the minutes distribution kind of pass or fail? Obviously, you know the data better than anyone. Bridges and Hart first and second in the NBA minutes per game. OG seventh.
I mean, if I had to give it a grade right now, I would say it's.
This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, I am joined by my brilliant co-host, Geoff. And today, Geoff, we are honored to have a returning guest, one of the absolute GOATs and pioneers of the Knicks and really NBA content creation in general. A man who gave me my start in this space by allowing me to appear on, the hugely popular podcast, the Knicks Film School, the Dean of Knicks Film School, Jonathan Macri. Jon, we really appreciate the time, man. It's good to see you.
That's really kind of you, and especially funny since I had Seth Rosenthal, obviously, who shepherded Posting and Toasting, starting in a long time ago. And I think I gave him the exact same intro that you just gave me. That like one of the freaking founding fathers, pioneers. No, I am a Johnny come lately, but I'm very happy that I have the platform that I have, and that I'm able to give space for talented folks like you guys to speak your piece.
We definitely really appreciate that, Jon. We want to make sure we get right into the content, right into the nitty gritty. So we're gonna dive right in and get straight to it. So obviously, I don't want to bury the lead. The Knicks are in the middle of a little bit of a rough patch with some losses of late. But Geoff and I, as our listeners know, we like to focus on the macro picture. We want to cut through the noise and really try to understand what's real. Like we really care about, a way to say it is, we care about the intrinsic value of a stock more than kind of just the random fluctuations, right? So that's kind of where our North Star is. And luckily we have you here, Jon, who knows this team as well as anyone in the world to help us kind of figure out what's going on, what's real as we get closer to halfway through the season. We're going to play a little game we like to call Pass or Fail. In this case, with the Dean, we got a little pass or fail with the Dean, and we're going to pose some trends, some observations we're seeing from the Knicks, and ask you, Jon, if they pass, meaning they're sustainable and represent who the Knicks really are, or if they fail, meaning they're just more of a blip, just temporary, things that we'll see regress or change as the season goes on.
So I like it.
Cool. We'll try to make this kind of quicker, maybe like 5 minutes or less each one, so we can kind of get through a few. But I'm going to start with the first one. We'll start with something a little more positive, despite obviously the recent stretch. This question is going to be: does Karl-Anthony Towns pass or fail as an MVP candidate this season? And just to give a little bit of context, we've seen the value of Karl-Anthony Towns that he provides as a center in this league. 98th percentile in EPM, 99th percentile in LeBron. That's fifth in the entire league, in the entire NBA. 67% true shooting, 44% from three, 35% defensive rebounding, number one defensive rebounder in the entire NBA. The Knicks are a top 3 team in their conference, key catalyst to a top 3 offense in the league. Is this real as far as Towns being an MVP candidate? Even if he doesn't win it, obviously. I just mean like in the upper echelon of candidates.
I was going to ask you, because people mean different things when they say MVP candidate. There's he can win the award, or he can appear. He has a chance to appear as one of the top 5 names at the end of the year. I think you mean. I
mean the latter.
Okay. I would. What am I doing? Pass? Yeah, I would pass him on that. I'm passing Karl-Anthony Towns. I think right now, because of the Luka injury, there's space for somebody to jump into 5th. I think as recently as 10 days ago, I probably would have made the case that Jalen Brunson was best positioned to jump in there. And this might just be recency bias. We all watched the Orlando game and the debacle that was, and the impact that not having Towns and replacing him with 2. I mean, I don't even know if they're replacement level players. in the context of this offense with how it's operating right now, like they were not. Anyway, I'm already getting off track. Yeah, I think his like MVP, I do think at a certain point it is a little bit context dependent, and it's funny because this offense got to such a nice level the last 2 years, really, like, and there were different reasons for that, and like they obviously relied on like offensive rebounding a lot more and all that sort of jazz, but like the way that they rely on him and the spacing that he provides in like different ways, like not in some traditional ways and some non-traditional ways, like all the cutting and his passing from the high post and all that stuff like that. I think that's all real, and I do think they rely on him. Like I was looking before at like I tend to use cleaning the glass more, like leaders in on off for like increase in effective field goal percentage, and like Towns they shoot point or 3 points or 3.0% higher for effective field goal percentage when he's on the court. That's in the 86th percentile, which is like 86th percentile. That's not like 90, fifth percentile or higher. But when you look at like the guys above him who are like have that kind of usage, it's Trae Young, SGA, Cade Cunningham, good job by him, and then Wemby and Jokic, and that's really it. It's a nice group to be in. And I buy it. They just like their offense takes off, I think, when he's on the floor. So yeah, I'll pass him.
I feel like I'm really glad that you brought Brunson into the conversation, because Cat versus Brunson in terms of their value and impact is so interesting to me, because on one hand you have this vacuum impact where Brunson is the head of the snake. He has the ball in his hands all the time. He does these things that traditionally you rely on more when it comes to an offense. And that's so huge, and it's so huge for the Knicks. I'm not trying to reduce the value. But I feel like this whole system, in terms of its ceiling, relies on Towns. And that's where his value comes from. And it is like the trickle-down effect once you lose Towns and once you lose that spacing, especially with how much they like to play Josh Hart. You need that. You can't, it's so hard to pair like Hart with Precious Achiuwa, Jericho Sims. You can't do that. You really, really need what Towns does for the team offense is huge. And I thought Jon really nailed it when he's like, okay, he's probably not going to win MVP, but I think, you get him in the conversation, you get him around top 5, he's first team, second team all NBA. That's going to result in the Knicks being a fringe title contender, if not a legit title contender.
You would think so. And I mean, like at the very least, like this was not happening initially, pretty quickly we saw the adjustment to like when Cat goes off, Hart goes off. So then when Cat comes on, kind of Hart comes back on. So like that was low hanging fruit, and it seems like they made that adjustment pretty fast. But yeah, no, I completely agree. Like Benji's made the point a few times, it's cool to see a reversion to the Brunson centric offense when Towns isn't on the floor and Brunson is on the floor, which has there are moments where it's cool, but like you definitely need 3 floor spacers in addition to whatever center you're out there, you have out there for that to work. And like it's not as good. It's not as good as when Towns is out there. It's just not.
But that's okay. I think Brunson, even in limited spacing, he's one of those weird players who's just so comfortable operating in a phone booth. He's so talented, and sometimes it actually seems like he prefers the muck. Like he loves throwing his body into people, and he just loves doing stuff like that. That's not a bad plan B to have, I'd say, is Jalen Brunson creating offense.
It's not, but like I'm just like looking at some numbers on NBA.com, and I know we said 5 minutes for each topic. I'll try to be quick with this one, and I don't know if I'm extrapolating this out too much, but if you look at all of their top 2-man combinations are all like combos of the starters. The highest among those by a comfortable amount is Towns and Hart, which leads me to believe that and there's no way to filter exactly for like the Towns bench units because there's a lot of different sorts of units, but just like that tells me the Towns plus bench units are like doing really well. And that makes sense to me because like we've seen those units do really well. And whereas, by the same token, I do have to say Towns or Brunson and Sims is plus 10 per 100, albeit in a slightly smaller sample size. So like, I don't know what to do with this stuff sometimes, but I agree with everything you guys have said on this.
Yeah, so you brought Brunson up, and I think that's a nice lead into our second question. So over the last 8 games, I think Brunson is 5 for his last 39 from three, and over the last 3 games, perhaps more concerning, the Knicks are 21 of 84 from three. So you can look at the percentage and say that's not a good percentage, but to me, what stands out is them only averaging 28 threes a game in these 3 games, which would be last in the NBA by a couple threes. Not good. Obviously, we have the Magic game, which we can kind of put aside. As we just alluded to, Towns is going to drive how many threes they can shoot. But Akshay and I talk all the time about tactics versus strategy, and with tactics being like X's and O's, and strategy being more like we're going to try to shoot a bunch of threes and then leverage that space to get to the rim. We believe pretty strongly that the Knicks' best chance of being one of the elite teams is having an elite offense that's built upon a lot of threes, creating space, and then getting to the rim. They're getting to the rim more, but are you worried at all, or do you think this latest trend with the three-point shooting is real, or do you think it's just a blip and it'll return to what we saw in December against maybe some weaker opponents?
You cut out for a sec, but I think I got the question. So is it? So do I? Both the I think the question is like both about the percentage and the volume, right?
I think more so about the volume. Are you worried at all about? Are you worried at all about this seeming change in strategy?
Yeah, I don't know that I would agree it's a change in strategy. I look, I don't. What the hell do I know? I have no idea. But like, if you listen to the coach, every time the coach has spoken since he took the job, he's talked about generating more threes. Like every time he talks about generating more threes. He also says a lot of other things like, make like the game tells you what to do and all that other kind of nonsense. But like, I think at its core, he wants to generate threes, and specifically, if you look at the evidence of his tenure, he wants to generate corner threes, which they're not really doing a lot of. I think this is something of a worry for me. I think a couple things. I think the loss of Deuce has made a real impact here. Maybe like because if you look at the on-offs in terms of like frequency, like when Deuce is on the floor, they just shoot a ton more threes, which is not a surprise because Deuce is the quickest trigger they have now that Dante is gone. Other than Campaign, who's not necessarily a guy you want firing away with reckless abandon. So I think, but like Deuce, that's one thing, and he's not in your starting lineup. So there's something more going on here, and I come back to Josh Hart a lot because Josh Hart, for all, like I'm obviously the captain of the Josh Hart fan club. I love Josh Hart. I think Josh Hart should play, all the minutes, but there are times where his presence constricts their ability to generate shots from behind the arc because he is hesitant at times. I think when you have Towns there, it's not as big of a deal because if Towns is on the floor with Josh Hart, then you give Josh Hart all this space to work and play and do all this stuff and like create offense. And like when their offense is humming, I think he is a big part of that, which is why I think I'm still leaning towards like it's better to have Hart in the starting lineup than not. And yet at the same time, like there are defenses that like the way they could play them and how smartly they are going to guard Hart. And it's like, well, just because they're playing off you doesn't mean you're going to be able to sneak backdoor or something because you're going to be looking out for that. And like, there aren't that many of those defenses in the league, but they're out there. I'm droning on and on. It is a worry. I do think 3-point volume is a concern for them moving forward. And I think my short answer that I've given to this topic throughout the year is they replaced one elite 3-point shooter with another, but the impact that those two 3-point shooters has on your overall team is so different. Like Cat, his 3-point shooting and his ability to shoot threes, obviously it kind of sets up this whole ecosystem, but he only wants to shoot 5 a game. Dante he'd take 12 a game. If in fact, I think he may have averaged like close to 12 a game over like much of the second half of last season or some absurd number that's like close to it. They didn't replicate that. Like the closest they have is Bridges. And Like he put up 11. He was 4 of 11 last night or against Orlando. So it's like, all right, that's okay. He's been better over the last month and change, but like he's the only guy. And like when you have OG going through these ups and downs, and then Hart, and now Brunson, he attempted 1 3 against the Magic, and it was a heave. Essentially, crazy. It was an end of clock heave. He wanted no parts of shooting threes. I think so. Yes, I'm worried, and at the same time, I feel like if Brunson just gets back to big Brunson behind the arc, I don't know if it's as big a deal as it might otherwise seem to be.
Yeah, I really like that answer. Super nuanced, as we would expect from you. And I would say in a really good way. I would say, like, for me, it's funny because you look at a lot of the on off numbers as far as like frequency and effective field goal percentage and that. And so you brought up Deuce. That's who I was thinking of. Like, Deuce is actually the biggest difference maker in how many threes they shoot. And at least my kind of hypothesis around that is because the bench really drives the 3-point shooting, because when the bench is on the court, they don't have as easy a way to generate paint rim attempts. And because they can't generate those rim attempts, they're more likely to jack up the first open 3 that they get. Whereas when Brunson's on, Towns is on, the rim protector's out of the paint, they can kind of get inside and score really close to the basket. I just feel like they have a little bit lost the balance a little bit. They kind of lost the plot to some extent. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think they can get back to, I think Deuce coming back is going to help. And I also think that, when you lose, that's when you really start to reevaluate what's going on. And so I think they'll do that a little bit.
Yeah. And like, look, we've been, I think, on different sides of the starting Josh Hart conversation. I think I would be open to at least like looking at it again and seeing what, like, again, are they going to do this? Can you do this? I don't know. Like, because when it's been good, it's been great, but it's also when it's not great, it does raise enough red flags where you're like, is this going to be an issue?
Boston is where I'm worried about it. Boston is where I'm worried about it. Yeah,
of course. And like they're not only arguably the best defensive team in the league, obviously them or OKC, but they're definitely the smartest, I would say. So like they'll be ready for everything. And Deuce might look, just because he doesn't do it in the regular season doesn't mean he wouldn't think about doing it in the postseason. Like, it's not like we haven't seen that before for this coach, but do you want to wait until the postseason to make that sort of change? Probably not. Yeah. Anyway, I would sit here and suggest something crazy, like a Danishevsky, like, why doesn't Josh Hart take off for 2 weeks? But this team is so freaking shallow, and they just can't afford to have anybody not be there. So I don't know that that's a conversation worth having even.
Well, the thing about Deuce starting for Hart, it actually leads into our next topic that I'll let XJ introduce, but I just want to throw something at you real quick. So XJ and I have gone back and forth about, whether Deuce should start, whether Hart should start. And I don't want to put words in XJ's mouth, but I think XJ feels a little bit stronger than I do about the pure on-court net of what the Knicks will gain. Whereas from my perspective, I've always been about, from day one of this offseason, I've been worried about the wing rotation. I've been worried that there are truly 3 wings that Thibs truly trusts. And that's obviously Hart, Bridges, and OG. He doesn't, to play small forward or power forward, those are the only 3 guys in the rotation he trusts. Clearly. And with how Thibodeau rotates and the style that he rotates, which is pretty much an ABA, which is his starters start, he gets the bench in to spell the starters, and then the starters finish the half. That's for the most part what he does. When the 3 wings that he trusts the most all start the game, it's really hard to build a wing rotation that doesn't involve those 3 guys just playing all the minutes. And so if there's a belief that Deuce versus Hart in the starting lineup leads to a net neutral outcome in terms of their overall net, I think what it does to shore up the wing rotation actually has intrinsic benefits long-term in terms of the minute ceiling that those 3 guys will play.
Yeah. It might. I see where you're going with that. I don't disagree that it's a possibility. I guess the other part of it is, like, again, you never know with like the inner workings of the locker room, and like it's like Hart himself brought up coming off the bench in the beginning of the year. Like, what do you do with that? Do you take him at his word? Like, he's a team first guy, and at the same time, he's also, no pun intended, the heart of the team. So if they went to him and they're like, "Hey, we want like," and also like, I don't think we're at the sample size enough that we would get that like that drastic of a change. Now, if things really continued like they have been going like the last few games, I maybe we would. But yeah, no, I see where you're coming from there. I don't think it's nuts.
Yeah, and I don't anticipate them making like a drastic change or anything like that right now. It's more of like, at least from my perspective, more kind of looking forward to those matchups where it's like, okay, these guys are going to really, really press hard on trying to exploit this specific kind of defensive coverage that they can kind of deploy.
Which we saw the Heat do, by the way, 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
2 years? Yeah, 2 years ago.
Exactly.
And Philly did it hard and Hart was up for the challenge, but Nick Nurse was very, very tried to be exploitative.
Yeah.
So I guess for our next question, and Geoff like kind of segued into it. For this one, we got to confront you, Jon. We gotta come after you. We have to talk about the Knicks minute situation. Couldn't have you on without talking about it. The question is going to be, does the minutes distribution kind of pass or fail? Obviously, the data better than anyone. Bridges and Hart, first and second in the NBA minutes per game. OG, 7th. Brunson and Cat, much more reasonable, 24th and 30th. So, not too much of an issue there, I think. The bench has had injuries with Precious at the beginning of the season. Obviously, we talked about Deuce McBride in and out. It's unclear with Mitchell Robinson on, when he comes back. Even when he comes back, what will his ramp up look like? So, for people who are thinking Mitch is going to save the day and come back, and then, Mitch may come back and play 10 minutes a game for 2 months. I have no idea what's going to happen. So
that's what I'd bet on.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a slow and long ramp up. So it's not
12 minutes or whatever.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. So just, do you think it's pass or fail on the sustainability going forward with respect to injuries, effectiveness of these players, either in the regular season or the playoffs, or do the Knicks need to either make a deal or play their bench more?
I mean, if I had to give it a grade right now, I would say I would give it an incomplete, which is, I think, more than I've been willing to say so far, because obviously I'm as staunch a proponent of the coach and his decision making as there is out there, much to my detriment. Like, my logic has always been pretty simple when it comes to the minutes for this particular team, which is that 2 of the 3 guys we're talking about, Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart, I kind of went into the season thinking and thought throughout a good portion of the season that minutes, like the way minutes affect 99% of NBA players, I wasn't sure they affected those guys in quite the same way. And that may sound silly. It might be silly, but I just look at Josh Hart and look at how he's carried himself since he was here, and specifically how he went about his business in like the postseason last year and like down the stretch of that season. And like, if the minutes were affecting him last year, I could not tell. And then Bridges, obviously he's led the league in minutes before. He's accustomed to playing like a ton. He has a way of going about his business where he just kind of like, he's gliding around out there. And it's like, again, if the minutes are like, I don't think I've seen anything noticeable from him where it's like, okay, this is really impacting him. And yet, like Josh Hart in the Magic game, I'll refer to something Benji did again. Like he had 5 plays. Like one, I think, was a turnover on offense. And I think the other 4 were just like mistakes on defense with like rotations or like over helping or not helping enough, whatever they were. And we saw it in real time because I was sitting next to him and we were commenting on it throughout the game to each other. Like he's just like, it's almost like his head isn't as in the game as it needs to be. And is that a result of being overtaxed? I have no idea. It might be. I genuinely have no idea. Is it a result of like Josh Hart being Josh Hart? Where again, another thing we've seen since he's been here is like, this is a guy who goes through ebbs and flows. He goes up and he goes down, and I don't know that there's any rhyme or reason for it. Could it be related to fatigue? It could absolutely be. Bridges, I don't know. I like his shot was short a couple times on on Monday. That was the first time I feel like I ever had the thought like he's playing too much. And then you go to OG, and OG's at 36.5 minutes a game, which is like, what should he be? What should OG Anunoby be playing? Like, ideally, in a perfect world, probably playing 34 minutes a game, 34.5 minutes a game, something like that. So we're talking about a minute and a half, or a minute per half. And like, that is my way of logicking my way out of this conundrum. And it's all well and good. And then you look at the sum total of the product, and it's like, it does not feel like these guys are as spry as they should be. And I thought, and the last thing I'll say on this, and I don't know that I've answered your question, but I thought it was interesting when I don't know. I apologize. I don't know which reporter asked him the question, but some reporter asked Brunson the question after the game, like, not are you guys tired, but is you being something about them being tired and it being an excuse. And whatever the question was, I remembered hearing the question, and Brunson absolutely had the opportunity to just say we're not tired, right? Or just be like, we played badly. But he was like, he said his response was more to the effect of like, whether we're tired or not, that's not an excuse. Like, we lost the game. And I found that to be very interesting, because I thought there were other ways you could have answered that question. And I don't know that, am I making entirely too much of that? Am I not making enough out of it? I don't know. I think they would be behooved by making some kind of a move. I think they will make some kind of a move. I don't necessarily. I for the life of me, I don't believe the answer is on this roster currently. I mean, I like Tyler Kolek, but like I don't. It just, he's a rookie. It's like It's really hard for rookies to come in. I don't have to tell you guys. It's hard for rookies to come in and contribute if you're not Emmanuel Quickly, or like a select handful of guys. So
rest in peace, Emmanuel. You're about to. It's going to be a rough one Wednesday night.
I mean, I was about to say, I hope he doesn't pull a Lazarus against the Knicks in Madison Square Garden. It's the last freaking thing we need right now. I think it's going to continue to be a talking point, but I would personally, maybe this is wishful thinking, I think they will. I don't think they're going to look like this for the rest of the year. I think they will find. I think let me put it this way. This is the best way I could probably answer this question. If we are still having this conversation to this degree after they spend the next however many weeks at home, a month, right? Whatever, it's about a month at home.
It's 11 of their next 13 games, and one of the road games is in Brooklyn,
and the other one's in Philly, where they could take a bus. Yep. If we're having this conversation in 3 weeks, there's a major freaking problem. And I think then, for as much as I'm the guy who's like, we can't, like, we don't have the evidence to say definitively yes, no, like what's going on here. If this is still a conversation and it's a valid conversation 3 weeks from now, based on what we're seeing, I think that's a major problem. And then I don't know what you do. Do you step in terms of the front office stepping in? Do you make it? Do you force yourself to make a trade to the extent that one is available? That's the best answer I can give you right now.
So I just have hopefully quick follow up, but you're the authority on Thibs as far as I know, and
I don't know about the authority. I definitely spend more time than I should thinking about the man.
Yeah. So you brought up something really interesting to me, and this isn't me, quote unquote, calling you out. This is just something I've been thinking about recently that's related to what you brought up. You said the answer isn't currently on the Knicks. And I agree with that, I think. I've never been a huge campaign fan. I know some of the numbers like him.
Not recently.
TJ Warren and G League, Matt Wright. These aren't, maybe Kolek, but we don't know. Precious has his moments. Okay. The answer isn't on this team. What I find interesting about that, though, is people always point to the other teams. Like the Knicks are the only one who don't have the answer. And they're like, well, if Thibs had bench X, Y, and Z, and I look at these other teams and I see the Cavs with Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill and Georges Niang. I don't know that any of those people would be viewed as the answer if they were on the Knicks right now. I think it's kind of a chicken egg thing to me. And so what I'm curious about with you is, okay, so the answer is not on the Knicks. Is there a scenario where you could see Tom Thibodeau getting late in the third quarter and thinking to himself, here's this guy, I'd rather have him on the court in a close game than Mikal Bridges? Because I don't see that with anybody.
Oh, well, no, that's an interesting question. I don't. So, yeah, no, that's something I've been thinking about a lot is like, okay, where is the trade for a player that they bring in and actually decreases the minutes of the guys that we're talking about here? The Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, and OG Anunoby, right? Because those are the guys. Aren't those the guys we're talking about? I think it's such a fantastic question, and I completely agree with you. It does not have a great answer, and I kind of fear that they're not going to get anybody who rises to that level, which is why it was so funny, like doing captain or no cap this past weekend with Jeremy, and he lands on Alec Burks, which is like Alec Burks is like kind of not, it's like a quasi rotation player for a team that's barely 500 and is like imploding based on the whole Jimmy Butler thing. And yet I believe that Top Thibodeau would play Alec Burks for better or worse.
Trust
I
factor.
believe he would play him. I think, this is what I always wind up doing on pods. I just parrot things that Benji says. I think because we were talking about this recently about like whether the answer is like, do you go get a guard, a wing, a big? I think you have to just go get a guy who is fits what who Thibs will trust. And is it going to be a perfect? Like, was Alec Burks a perfect fit last year? Was Bogdanovich a perfect fit last year? No. But I think Thibs trusted those guys. And I think if you look at Campaign and Landry Shamet and Precious Achiuwa, you understand why he trusts those guys even to the and that is fully recognizing the fact that they have not more recently, especially lived up to the bargain. Let me just quickly on the first part of it that you brought up. It's like all these other teams have all these other guys. I think they just frankly kind of, I'm not gonna say screwed themselves over by making the trades that they made, obviously to get Bridges and Cat. They boxed themselves into this corner, and I think they took a few swings in free agency and they just nothing came through. Like we know they were in on certain guys, and it just didn't happen. I guess my point is it's not for lack of trying, but I do think that they just needed one other guy that they could have gotten it somewhere along the way, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to get that guy now.
Yeah, it does. It does also just raise an interesting conversation about overall trade-offs, just in terms of should Thibodeau be willing to live with a slightly worse product in the short term if it means, and we don't know how to land on that. Look, John, I know we said we'd get you out of here, so we're going to let you get out of here. But
it's all good. You want to finish up with one more thing?
We have one more. That's what I was going to say. We've got one more for you. It's a quick one. It's a very general one. It's a big one. Look, the Knicks. No, you're good. The Knicks. We can talk about this 3-game losing streak that they're on right now, but I think most people would have signed for where they're at right now. Top 5 net rating. They're top 10 in both offense and defense. They've played some really, aside the Boston game, they played Cleveland pretty close. They outplayed Oklahoma City for 3 games. They're clearly a good team with, in my opinion, a championship ceiling. Do you buy the Knicks as a championship team this year as constructed?
As constructed, so they don't make a trade?
Well, give them. There's a chance they could make a trade, but you see, just
with what they have to work with, factoring in the likelihood that they make. Will I pick them to win a championship? No. Do I think they're going to win the championship this year? No. Do I think enough realistically could break right where they could win the title this year? Yeah.
Trying to get yourself to it.
Man, there's Boston and OKC are just so solid. And OKC might not even make the finals. The West is a but if someone beats them, forget about the West. If you make it to the finals, you have a chance to win the championship. So forget about the West. But I even mentioned the West. Yeah, sure. Sure. Because Boston, Boston has a top 6, and they've. I mean, again, talk about one of those teams who you look at and you're like, they have a 7th and an 8th and a 9th guy who could come in and like play pretty good basketball. Now the Celtics have been scuffling lately, so maybe that's being tested a little bit. But like, are they as top 6 dependent as the Knicks are? Probably not, but it's close. And if you lose the wrong one of those guys, and again, they have 2 guys in Drew and KP who are not exactly, and Hartford, who are like, you wouldn't bet your life that those 3 guys are going to make it through the playoffs like unscathed and like being as productive as they need to be. So yeah, I mean, like, a little bit of hot shooting, maybe just it's like. Might it come down to like the right in-series adjustment that catches Boston off guard in like the right game where you can go up, where you steal a game, you go up 3-1, and it comes down to like the last 5 minutes of a game 6 or 6. Yeah, they're good enough that they could do that. It really does feel like they need one more piece, and I can't convince myself that they're going to get that player at this. During this transaction cycle, it feels like they're going to need another summer and another trade deadline to put the finishing touches. And then the last thing, and I know we're going over, but I as do you guys, I pay a lot of attention to NBA history, and I know it's like anecdotal, the ultimate anecdotal evidence, because every year is different and every situation is different. But you look at the teams that have made the moves of the caliber of moves that the Knicks have made, and how few of those teams win in year one. And the ones that do win in year one, it's like you could pick at Boston in 08 to me is the closest, and like they built the perfect, like it was like I don't know, I don't have to talk about Boston for a 08. Like they're like you knew it when you saw it, and yet they went to how many game 7s?
They went to
pretty sure
2.
4.
No, just 2.
It was it. Didn't they go to game?
They went to game 7. They went to game 7 against Atlanta in round 1. Game 7 against Cleveland in round 2.
That's Detroit, right. And then
Detroit took them to 6, and then LA took them to 6.
LA took them to 6. So, but whatever. They went to 2 game 7s of the first 2 rounds to like get over that.
And Cleveland could have won that game 7. That's one of LeBron is littered with games he could have won by himself, and that he scores 45 in Boston. That's one of the great performances that very few know about.
It's a great call by you. But like, yeah, like you want to point to like KD going to the Warriors, like, okay, great. Like that's not
there's no comparison for that one.
No, yeah. there's no comparison there. There's like maybe a couple others that you could point to, but it's really like just teams don't. It's really hard to do this in year one, and I consider this in a lot of ways year one. And I think how the season has played out thus far is further evidence that it is a year one as opposed to year whatever this is of like the Thibs era. And then on top of all that, when you factor in the cap constraints that exist now that did not exist throughout the history of the NBA, and how it just becomes so difficult if you're an apron team to really make a move, not only because you have apron concerns, but because you are trying to make transactions with other teams who have apron concerns. So nobody could do a blessed thing. And yeah, so that's my answer.
I would say the closest team to the Knicks in terms of the type of acquisition they got, and this plays perfectly into the point you're making, would be the 2019 Raptors.
That's the other one, but they replaced DeMar DeRozan with Kawhi Leonard and kept everything else the same.
Yeah,
and they got Mark. Did they get Gasol at the deadline, or they?
I think they got one. It was either Gasol or Ibaka who they got at the deadline. But that's to your point. This actually, when we were talking about this team the other day, this team was ridiculous. Their bench was Fred VanVleet, Norm Powell, OG Anunoby, and Serge Ibaka. It's like that was their bench. This is again not comparable. Kawhi Leonard goes into a situation. This team was going to immediately be title contenders. They were going to immediately have synergy. There really is no precedent, to your point, of a team getting 2 new guys like Bridges and Cat and immediately just taking the league over. Besides,
and they were a bounce of the ball away, to say nothing of maybe a KD Achilles away from not winning it all.
Yep.
So I don't know what you do with any of that. I mean, we're talking about Boston. It took Boston a fucking decade or nearly, like whatever, 8 years of the Brown era at least. I forget. I think Tatum maybe is 7 years, but yeah, it's hard, man. It's hard to win it all, but like, yeah, they can do it. I think they can do it.
These are great points, John, and definitely making me like reconsider how I'm thinking about some things. Because I mean, I don't think they're going to win a championship this year, but I think I felt a little bit like they have a little bit of better of a chance than you seem to think. But now you're kind of making me pull back on that. Like maybe they have the luck chance where like, hopefully, God forbid, someone on Boston gets injured or something like that. But outside of that, it's going to be tough. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that perspective.
Sure thing.
And
appreciate your perspective
and appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us and answering our questions and kind of letting us put you on the hot seat for a little bit. Just really appreciate you always supporting what we're doing here and just appreciate your time.
It is my pleasure. I think the Knicks fan community is better when there are a variety of voices and perspectives, and it's just because there's like, there's a market for all this. So I'm happy you guys are doing what you're doing and appreciate you having me on. I guess Andrew would want me to plug Knicks Film School, so
please do that. Yeah.
Whatever. Everybody knows where to find us. So
I was gonna say, John, for the whole Hot Hand Theory audience that has never heard of Knicks Film School, please plug that.
It's all good. Listen, you guys are killing it, and thank you.
Speaking of plugs, XJ, we have another episode on the Kings that'll be coming out. Keon Ellis, not the Kings, on Keon Ellis. He joins Goga Batadze as an almost Nick in Knicks fans' minds. And we're on the road to 2K. So if you like this episode and John did such a good job today, just click that button for us. We'd appreciate it. I just did XJ's job.
You just did my job. Appreciate it. I don't have to say anything else. We'll see you on the next episode.